Morning to everybody, and advanced happy mission to all my missionaries out there. I can't tell who you are because I don't see the t-shirts or anything, but I know you're going to do a great job. This morning, instead of looking at the example of John or even Jesus, I'd like to take a look at the kind of tragic life of Herod the Tetrarch. And I think we can call him kind of a synthesis of all the vices. And if there's one thing we can learn from Herod, it's how one sin leads to another. Okay, don't worry, I'm going to get to you in Spanish in a minute. First of all, one thing that is obvious is that Herod is a person who is ensnared by the sin of lust. I was doing a retreat recently, and the preacher, actually I'd heard this not too long ago anyway, but the preacher brought up, he said, St. Thomas Aquinas said that out of all the sins, what is the sin that most causes spiritual blindness? And normally you would think maybe pride or something. He said, no, it's actually lust. And then he went through his analysis as to why. And that corresponds with what Jesus said in the gospel, blessed are the pure of heart, for they shall see God. Well, if you take the opposite of that then, if you are not pure of heart, what does that mean? You're not capable of seeing God. And the reason lust is so dangerous is because it engages psychologically, physically, it gets your passions revved up, and it makes us focus on something so strongly over here that we don't have time or attention for the things of God. But we know that Herod was guilty of more than that, right? Thomas Aquinas also said the number two thing that makes us blind to God, which again, probably most of us would not have thought of, is avarice, love of money, the disordinate love of money. Because really, it's a form of lust again. It's the same thing, it has the same effect that those who are subject to the sin of avarice, it makes us focus on the material realities around us that are immediately tangible so strongly that we tend to take our eyes off of the things that are more abstract, but more real and more important ultimately, which is God and the things of heaven. And if you look at the life of Herod, what do we begin with? First of all, we know, I'm sure he grew up rich kid, spoiled, attached to money. I have no doubt. But number two, we know that from the beginning he was already affected by the sin of lust. Why in the world did he marry Herodias in the first place? She had been the wife of his brother. He knew it was illegal. Why? Because the sin of lust clearly affected him. And Herodias, who was a manipulative snake woman, she knew this. She knew how to use, she must have been an attractive girl, she knew how to use that, and she knew what the weakness of her husband was. So right off the bat, you have this man who is willing to do things, he's willing to compromise his conscience because of this sin of lust. And John the Baptist comes out and says, you can't do that. This is an illegal marriage, and he preaches. So inevitably, what's he do? Well, he stick John in prison. Now, here it says he wanted to kill John, but he didn't because he feared the people. What's that? Human respect. Third sin. Sin of vanity, under the form of human respect. Interestingly enough, if you read the Gospel of Mark, it says that actually Herod liked to listen to John. He was attracted to John. The reason he threw John in prison was basically because of his wife. He didn't want to have to listen to her and put up with her all the time. So you've got this guy who's willing to commit a serious sin, a serious injustice, and throw this man in prison. What happens next? One sin leads to another. Because of the sin of lust, he then performs the sin of injustice. And then, because of the sin of lust again, then he goes and gets himself good and drunk because of his vanity. He's throwing a party. Because of his vanity, he puts himself in a situation where he's extremely drunk. And again, because of a sin of lust, gets to the point where now he's stuck. He makes a stupid oath that implies, he says, I'm going to give you whatever you ask for. Tell me whatever you want, because he's all worked up by this dance at this wasn't even his daughter-in-law gave, and he ends up having to commit murder. And you see how one sin leads to another sin, leads to another sin, leads to another sin. Okay, why am I talking about all this? Because this happens here all the time. How many times are marriages broken because of a sin, for example, of lust? Leads to, there's an attraction, leads to an injustice, leads to a broken marriage, leads to problems with the children who grow up in fatherless families, for example, may lead to alcoholism, may lead to one sin leading to another, to another, to another. This is the stuff of every day for us. And we have to understand our sins are not indifferent. When we allow one sin in our life and we say, well, that's not a big deal. I can be a good Catholic and I'll just accept this little sin over here. It is a big deal. Because that sin is going to multiply. And it's going to start leading you to other kinds of sins. And before long, you might find yourself doing things that you never would have dreamed of doing. It all began because I said, I accept this sin over here.